And now let's talk a little bit about contemporary clothes. So not really the historical perspective, but contemporary clothes and what kind of symbolic values can be deduced from contemporary clothes. So, for example, here we have on the slide different versions of clothes related to religious belief. We have different types of Islamic headwear for women, so the hijab and the niqab and the burqa, so you can see the difference, but also some less obvious clothes inspired by religious belief, like a burkini, so a cross between a burqa and a bikini, so the costume for swimming and sea bathing for Muslim women. If you think that religious convictions are expressed only in Islam, you're very wrong. Here we have an Orthodox Jewish family wearing very characteristic clothes, but this time it's more characteristic in the menswear rather than the women's wear. There are some things that Jewish women wear to mark their religious belonging, but it's basically modest clothes and covering your hair or wearing a wig sometimes. But in case of traditional Orthodox Jews, it's more visible in men's clothes. If you think that Christianity doesn't have that, think again. If you go to Italy in summer, in many churches, you can find such notices that you need to be properly dressed, so not to reveal too much skin, to be able to see the inside of a church, even as a tourist. So these things are not really historical evidence, they are still going on. If we talk about the English culture and fashion, we can talk about, well, the characteristics of the English fashion. And here I'm actually taking this from a book by Kate Fox, Watching the English. I uploaded the book, the ebook, to Moodle. So if you want to read more, this is a very interesting book to read. It's not only about fashion, it's about generally typical social behavior of English people. The clothes, the foods, the social customs. But what can you find, what would be the characteristics of English fashion, at least traditionally understood? So first of all, eccentricity, creativity, informality and irony. You have some famous clothing designers like Vivienne Westwood or Alexander McQueen, and if you look at their clothes, their collections, they are all about eccentricity and creativity. They are very fanciful and sometimes shocking. This is connected with a very strong subcultures in 20th century British culture. So we have this kind of collective distinctiveness of some groups, like punks, for example, who would distinguish themselves from other groups mostly by clothes. If you look at some famous occasions like the Ascot races, where women come wearing very elaborate and extravagant hats, this is part of English culture. And even if you look at the clothes worn by the Queen herself, it's very informal. It's very ironic sometimes. She looks like this, let's say, country lady, especially that she likes, or she liked when she was younger, all kinds of outdoor pursuits like horse riding. She was a horse breeder all her life, so there you go. We have the concept of the regional or national dress, and you have two examples here. One is the Highland dress, the traditional costume of men in Scotland, with some typical elements. So you can see these elements here. The most typical is, of course, the kilt. so the lower part of the costume, which resembles a skirt. It's not a skirt, it's a tailored garment, traditional Scottish garment called a kilt. Perhaps even a sporran is also quite a well-known element. This is this bag, decorative bag worn at the front of the kilt, mostly because traditionally they do not wear underwear beneath it, so they really don't want the wind to lift up the front of the kilt, so they use the sporran to keep it in place. The other image is another tradition, a regional tradition in London, going back to the late 19th century, the so-called pearly king and queen. So here we have two people dressed up in this fashion for some formal occasions. Working class people, especially those who are involved in tailoring, in production of the clothes and production of pearl buttons that were very fashionable at some points in the 19th century. They started using like the spare buttons or some extra buttons to decorate their clothes, and this is still quite a popular working class tradition in London. So it's not only the rich who had regional dress. Two more slides. One is the costumes used in films. How do you choose a costume for a film character, especially if you want to do costume drama? So here we have two examples from very successful films and TV series. Downton Abbey. So we have one of the daughters of the family wearing this rather exotic looking costume at the beginning of the 20th century with some loose pants, and another from the film Django Unchained, this kind of late 19th century fantasy about the black superhero. And as you can see, he's wearing the sunglasses, and this shape of sunglasses was absolutely unknown in the 19th century. So this could be ironic, this could be symbolic to denote that this character doesn't really fit, I would say, psychologically his time frame. But what you normally have to consider is what was available in the period and what would the character choose to wear. So like this character from Downton Abbey, she is the youngest and most independent and rebellious daughter of the family. So the moment that this costume with pants became available, she would have it. She was rich and she wanted to shock, so this is what she would have. The last thing is what I call the morality of clothes. So let's say the aspects connected with clothing that point to moral and social issues. And here we have three things to consider. One is this costume for a little girl that's quite sexualized. So does fashion sexualize little girls? Does it make them look like women before they are physically grown? Sometimes it does. Is this a problem? What can we do about it? What should we do about it? The other problem is the counterfeit fashions, the fake logos. So not Adidas, but as you can see, Adidas or Abibas or other similar names that do not fully follow the logo of a popular producer, but they are similar enough so that people can be lured by the lower price or kind of cheated into buying these clothes when they want to have the original fashions. This is definitely a legal problem. Is this a moral problem as well? What do you think of counterfeit fashions? Should the police be more decisive in fighting that. And the last thing is this image of a young woman from probably one of the Asian countries like Bangladesh or Pakistan, which are now very active in clothes production, and this is from one of the social campaigns. The caption reads, "I'm the real fashion victim." So we have slave labor, sometimes slave labor of children and very young people, who are also the addressees of many of the fashions in the West. So this quite miserable and poor looking young woman from probably one of those places where slave labor is used to produce cheap, poor quality but cheap, fashionable clothes, is really the victim, not because like some of the fashionistas in the West, she just follows the changes of the styles very closely and feels compelled to buy new clothes every so often, but because she really suffers the injustice and abuse of the fashion industry. So that's it. You'll have the quiz as well. I know who made the quiz. You'll have to make them in the end. I know how many, and I know the exact list of people who are watching the films and doing the quizzes. And you don't have to do it, but then I don't have to give you the credit for the course. So we are all grown-ups. Do what you should do. It will be much easier for you to pass the final test and to get a good mark in the end. And next week we'll talk about the food. Thank you.